Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Awaken to Your Soul Path. I am your host, Barbara, and today I am joined by the beautiful Kate Butler. And we are going to be talking about your story because everybody has a story and everybody's story matters. So, thank you so much for agreeing to be a guest on my show today, Kate. And I've been looking forward to talking about this topic.
Thank you so much. I'm so happy to be here and can't wait to dig into it. Absolutely.
And so you have a special connections to stories because not only do you have a story, I think you're also someone who facilitates other people's stories. And not only by publishing it, but I think also in many other different ways, right?
Absolutely. I can relate back to story being such an integral part of my life. Really, from the time I can start putting pieces together, you have those moments, right, where you start to have those pieces that you string together. And I've never been, the star student, and math really isn't my thing. And if I look back, it was really always story that helped me connect with people, get my point across, communicate with people, right? Like it started really young for me. And I used story to really kind of survive, in life and later on, I guess thrive in life. And so I've kind of made it my mission to help other people do the same.
I love that. So I think there's a story behind that as well, right?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. It's really interesting. I will say this, this one particular story comes to mind. I was in the fifth grade, so I was around 10 or 11 years old. And it, I had tried out for the school play, right? Like, talk about story, right? Like, I mean, like that's all that is right? Telling a story in publicly in front of people. And I don't know what made me do it because we were in the same with the same 20 kids, very small school, but same 20 kids from kindergarten all the way up to fifth grade was the last grade. And the same people would get the same main parts every single year. And that's just the way that it was, right? And so I don't even know what made me do it. Maybe because it was the last year of the school, right? Like we were, kind of like after that, it was like go big or go home. It was going to be the last one, but I went for it. I went for the main star. It was like the Nutcracker, and it was Marie and the Nutcracker, and and I'll never forget, like the music teacher who orchestrated the play was just as surprised as I was that that I got the main part, right? And so here I am, and I'm like, I'm really starting to understand how much I really love to embody the power of story, right? But this is what did it for me. Um, and it's so funny that I thought of this the way that I had just described, like how I use story to kind of help myself, like as I was younger. But this is interesting because I haven't thought about this in quite some time. But I remember standing on that stage on opening night and looking out the curtain, and everyone's family from the school was coming in, filling up the auditorium, and the moms and the dads and the grandparents and the kids. But I had seen all these people for years and years and years. I've
Mhm.
seen them at pick up at school. I see them on the soccer fields on the weekends, or I see them in the, drugstore or the supermarket or whatever. And they would always just be like walking around like this, like, going through the motions, going through the motions, going through the motions, right? And this day, right, they sat down, they came into the auditorium, going through the motions, going through the motions, shh, shh, looking at each other, snipping at each other, the whole nine, right? Like all the things that we do. And then the curtain opened and we started the play and we began to share the story. And I watched, it was probably a 43-minute play. 43-minute story, right? With all of us, combined. And I watched over those 43 minutes how the entire audience shifted. They went from people that were kind of miserable, people who were just going through the motions, people that were really outside of their body, not really in alignment, really not in touch, right? There was no level of fulfillment happening at all.
Yeah.
And I watched them go like this into joy. I watch smiles come across their faces. I watch them embrace moments and enjoy each other in the audience and look and make eye connection and laugh. All of a sudden, I realized through story, like this is me at a young age, I realized like through story, you can make genuine connection.
Mhm.
Like through story, you can truly start to, ignite things in yourself. You can truly, through story, find inspiration or find joy or find happiness in these threads. And sometimes it's through finding that in other people's stories. And that clicked for me. That clicked for me at that young of an age. And I feel like I've always kind of carried that with me. And so when I got to be an adult, I began to have children, I thought it was very important that I shared a story, right? To kind of leave something for my own girls, if you will, about the way that I saw the world that was always kind of much different than the way everyone else around me saw it.
Mhm.
Uh, I was a weird kid. I'm like a weird adult too, but I was a
Yeah.
weird, but
Yeah.
I was a weird
I
kid,
hear you. I'm the same.
right? And so I was like, I don't care. It's okay to be weird. And I wanted my kids to know that, right? So I wrote a children's book when they were basically an infant and a toddler. I had my kids 2 years apart. They were both babies. I wrote my first children's book. And it's really about the power of perspective, right? Like you get to see things in a different way and you get to be weird and you get to just be who you are, right? But it was this, again, this power of story. And that book ended up being on the bestseller charts for over 100 weeks straight. First time being an author, I had no idea what I was doing. And that really is what set me on the trajectory for where I am now, which is continuing to write my own books, but also help other people share their stories. But that's really kind of how that happened for me.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for sharing that. And it also perfectly illustrates the many different ways in which you can talk about your story, share your story. You already mentioned a couple. You can write a book. You can also write a play. You can also tell your story when you write blogs or when you write social media posts. And people also have more than one story. And we're a collection of stories,
Mm.
as you will, right?
I completely agree, and I find that the more and we can tell our story just by having coffee with a girlfriend, right? Or, just by picking up the phone and I know you like to walk in nature and I love to walk every day too. It's one of, my most favorite things to do. And sometimes I'll like to catch up with a friend while I talk because, or I might not get a chance to do that day. And it's that connection point of sharing the stories, right? And so I think there's just so many ways that we can begin to share our story. And I absolutely believe that in sharing the story is kind of like, it's almost like when we go through something, I believe it is for us and it's for part of our lesson, right? Part of why we're here. But I also think it's to share so that it's like that pay it forward thing that we're also here to share what we took from that story to help someone else, right? And so I do believe our stories are for us, but I also think that they're for the purpose of others as well.
Yes, the lessons learned, or it's also a big part behind my channel. It's to let people know that they're not alone, and that they're not the only weird ones. That there are many, many more weird ones out there, and that they feel heard, that they feel seen, maybe understood for the first time in forever. That's
Mm.
why I love having talks like this and talking about people's stories, sharing people's insights, tips, things they've learned along the way, because that wasn't there when I was going through everything that I was going through. And this is my version of giving back. I give back in many
Mhm.
different ways, but this is one of them. Well, we talked about being weird, and for most of my life, I saw that as problematic.
Right.
I thought that I was broken. There
Yeah.
was something wrong with me. I seriously, genuinely thought that there was something wrong with me and that I needed to be fixed. And now I still think I'm weird and strange, but I think I don't want to be any other way, right? This is who I am, and you either like it or you hate it. And frankly, I've reached a point in my life where either one is fine.
Mhm. Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, I love that. There's so much power in that for sure.
Thank you. But part of what we are talking about today is your story matters, right? So that
Mm.
also sort of implies, and I've seen this firsthand, is that a lot of people don't think they have a story that matters, or that they don't matter, that their story doesn't matter. So what are your insights on that?
Oh, goodness. This is the one that kind of like gets me to my core, right? This is really where I feel very called. And so we have published over 650 number one best-selling authors now, right? And all of those people, every single person, I speak to every person individually to figure out if it's in alignment. Because I won't just publish. I always say, like, I can make anybody a bestseller, but I won't just make anyone a bestseller. I don't, listen, I love a good fiction, but I don't do sci-fi. I don't do the horrors. Like, it has to be under the inspirational umbrella. We only publish stories that are meant to either heal, help, or serve someone in some way. That's it. If it falls under that umbrella, we can have a discussion. And if it doesn't, that's okay. There's plenty of people out there. It's just not for us. And so when I speak to these people, every single one of them, it's one of two things. They either think their story is too much, like I couldn't possibly put this out there. Like, what will people think, right? Like I couldn't possibly share like, X, Y, and Z, right? Or they think their story is not enough. Who would want to hear from me? Who would want to listen to me? Who would want to read this, right? Who would ever get a takeaway from what I have to share?
Yes.
And started to see this pattern, and I'm thinking to myself, and then we would work through it, we would unpack it, right? And 650 people later, of course, right? But this was very early on in the process. I went, hold on a second. So now we got through that, we unpacked that, shared your story, and look how many lives have been impacted and changed as a result of you sharing your story. I mean, we're talking global connection,
Mhm.
global change, right? I mean, depending on the person and the author in the book, of course, but there are a lot of books early on that massive success. And I'm thinking to myself, none of this would have happened if we had allowed ourselves to believe, right? Those limiting dialogues that we internally share with ourselves that
Mhm.
tell us we're either too much or we're not enough, right? And that's where that really started with me, where I'm like, no, every single person has, to your point, at least one story, right? And it matters. Like, your story matters. And there are not enough people out there that are saying you deserve to be seen, you deserve to be heard, you deserve to be understood, and you deserve connection. Sometimes you're not going to get that connection with the people that you grew up with in your immediate family, or even in your town, or even in your state, or sometimes even in your country. I just packed my kids up and moved to Europe for 3 months. We just got home a few weeks ago, right? I'm like, we need to explore something different. Like, we need to go somewhere else, right? And it's not because we don't have people here that we love, but it's because I'm an explorer and I believe that a lot of stories matter. And I wanted to tap into something bigger than just in our surrounding. But I also wanted to show them there's a big old world out there,
Yeah.
so that if they ever feel like they are in surroundings where people are saying that their story doesn't matter, they know that there's a big old world of people out there that they can connect into. So
Yeah.
that's really where my passion lies, is really helping people understand that and letting them know that
Mhm.
there's at least one person, me, who believes your story matters and wants you to be seen and heard, understood, cared for, and loved. So that's really where that stems from for me.
I love that. It inspired me to think about this a man that I met. He was in the late 80s, so 88, I think he was, and gray and like old people, and we got to talking, and he was writing a book about his experiences in the Second World War, how it impacted his family, how it impacted him as a child, how they had to uproot in the middle of the night, only were allowed to pack a few belongings, how he lost his favorite stuffed animal, all of these things, but from the perspective of a child, right? We
Mhm.
read so many history books about the Second World War, and with lots and lots of information, but I had never read a story about that time from the perspective of a 5-year old, or yeah, I think he was 5 or 6. And it touched me that he allowed me to read his story. He was
Mm.
I wanted to read his story, and I love that he took the time to write it down. And I think so many people have no clue anymore what it's like to live in a war in the first world countries, of course. So there are no wars, major wars in the western part of Europe. There are no major wars anymore in America or any of the other first world countries. So there is no one to talk about these stories. And if these people don't share those stories, you will never get to see a different type of perspective on something that can be presented as extremely dry in a history book.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my gosh, that's fascinating seeing that from that child perspective. I mean, there is just so much that you could learn from that. So many layers to unpack there. That is fascinating to me. Wow.
Yes, it was extremely fascinating to me as well. So we had a great time connecting and bonding over that story. And
Yeah.
so it's not just the story that you're telling, and the people that you're reaching, but you're also connecting with people through your story in ways
Right.
that you have never seen or
Hmm.
imagined to be possible. I've been trying to get my uncle to write his story because he has always been a hippie, I think is the best way to describe him, and a wandering spirit. And he's wandered to many different corners of the world, and he's been married many, many times, and he has many, many stories. And I, for one, would love for him to write them down, but he is in that state where he thinks, well, who cares?
Mm,
So,
interesting.
how
Mm.
I have a two-part question, I think. What would you say to someone like that to get them to see that their story matters? And
Mm.
how could you, or how could I, if for people who are listening, who might are in a similar situation as I am, who know someone with a story worth telling, and that person is reluctant, how can you help them tap into seeing the worth of their story?
Well, I think that both questions have the same answer. And for me, that it really boils down to um, the fact for all of us, by the way. So this is like an answer to for your questions, but it's also an answer for all of us. And it is that it isn't about us. It's not about us. When we share our stories, it's for the other person. It's like it's for them to receive, right? It's to leave, your footprint, but not for you, like for the other person to be able to pull right from like what you have been blessed with, like, right, like you've been blessed with this life and these experiences, right? um and whether you believe in God or the universe or source or like infinite intelligence or whatever your language is, I think that we all believe that we're here for some type of purpose, right? But that purpose isn't just for you and you, right? And so when we understand that part of that purpose is allowing other people to learn from our purpose, that's really where the good stuff is, and so that's what I would say is, and this is like when we help people get on stage too, it's the same thing, right? That fear of getting past, whatever it is. Like you don't think that anybody cares about the story, you don't think you have enough time to write the story, you're too scared to get on the stage and tell the story. Once you tap into something outside of yourself, once you tap into like, hold on, if this could change a life, like if you had the cure for cancer today, what would you do? Like you would be like, everyone, right over here. I have something to say. Get in here. I have something to say. Like you would tell every single person that you knew, right?
Mhm.
Because you wouldn't hold that, right? So when we start to come outside of ourselves and say, I know something, I've been through something, like I have, journeyed to these corners of the world, right? And someone's life can be healed from this or saved from this or shifted from this or changed from this, and you get outside of yourself and you start to give that back, that's the good stuff. Isn't that what it's all about? For
I
me, it is.
totally agree, and
Yeah.
I know that that is true, and I've tried talking to him in this manner and pointing these things out, and his response is then, "Yeah, you know, but Sure, no. So
Ah,
he listens to me, but he doesn't entertain the notion. I think it has to do with he does not believe that he could really impact someone.
right, right. You know, and people impact people in different ways, right? And we talked earlier about, a simple conversation can be an impact, so maybe his impact is the one-on-one conversations in a coffee shop, conversations on a train with a perfect stranger, maybe that's his impact, you know what I mean? And so, the work that we do, it's people who mainly feel like I haven't been through this in vain. You know what I mean? Like, I can't be the only one. I haven't been through this in vain. And I want to share this because I already kind of have that inkling, that desire, that knowing that if I do share this, that's
Mhm.
going to help at least one person. Do you know what I mean? And so it is helpful when people start from that place to say, like, I really kind of feel like this pull to share this story, whether it be from the stage or whether it be, getting your story published, whatever that looks like. And I really have a feeling this is going to help somebody else. And when you have that kind of alignment, you're not just helping one person, it's going to amplify, it's going to help thousands of people out there, right? But if it's just focusing on that one for now, that's perfect, because if that's what it takes to get the story out, then that's wonderful, right? Yeah.
Uh, yeah, I totally agree. Thank you. What I was thinking when you were talking is that I also meet a group of people who feel what you were saying, feel like, okay, I do have a story. I would like to write a story. I feel that there is a story, but then nothing. Right? They feel like I cannot get clear on what to
Yeah.
write about, or even if I want to be writing, if I can write, if I am a writer, or if they think, well, maybe I am a speaker, so I want to have a TED talk or maybe a speaking presentation, but they have no clue on how to use their story and turn it into a book or a TED talk or a presentation. How do you help people like that? Or what would be the process for people that are in that?
Absolutely. Well, just to be very clear, but then I'll unpack it a little bit, is that, we have a simple 6-step process and that's it. Easy peasy, lemon squeezy, right to the point. Because if this becomes overly complicated, no one would ever publish their story. I mean, let's be honest, right? Like, our stories are big. Some of the people are sharing a whole life, other people's are sharing moments or chapters of life, right? And so it has to be simple. It's a very, very simple 6-step process. That's it. We walk you through the process, and it has to be a system, right? Just like anything else. Like, if somebody told me, go build a website, I would be like, but if they gave me the steps and they started to show me how to code and they started to give me the ins and outs of WordPress and so on and so forth, then all of a sudden I could do it because I had the steps to do it, right? It's the same thing. And so if you understand the strategy, if you understand the steps, anyone can do it. I always say, like, you don't have to be a good writer to have a fantastic book, right? That's just like not even a real thing. You just have to have the system of how to get the story out, because everyone has a story in them. Everyone has a story. So there is a little bit of a, art behind polishing a story. That's what editors are for. That's part of the steps, right? Is that your story goes to editing, right?
Yeah.
And so, just like if I were to be building that website that I referred to, I might be able to build the framework, but if I'm not a designer, I might enlist the help of a designer to help me pull it all together. It's the same thing, right? We may enlist the help of an editor to help us polish it up, but there really is a simple system. I mean, the bottom line is, what is the core of the message that we want to say, right? And then, I always say, with my authors, we start with the end game in mind and we reverse engineer it from there. So it just looks like this, right? What do you want your reader to get out of this? And how do you want your reader to feel? How do you want your reader to feel when they're done reading your story?
Mhm.
Right. And so if we can just be really clear on that, then it's like, okay, so then this is the message we want to talk about. And this is, how we want them to feel and what we want them to get out of it at the end. So what are the top 3 things that then you want to, so a lot of what we do is collaboration books as well. So if we're talking about a chapter, that's a lot easier than an entire book. right? And so if we're talking about a chapter, just to at least start there, which is a really good starting point for people, especially if they feel like they do have a huge story and it's overwhelming. It's like,
Mhm.
okay, what are like 3 to 5 things that we want, that we have to include in our story? And out of those 3 to 5 things, then what are the 3 bullet points you want to put under each topic? And then go back to those bullet points and make each bullet point a sentence. And
Yeah.
then go back to that sentence and add 2 more sentences of what you want to say. And before you know it, those bullet points become sentences, the sentences become paragraphs, and those paragraphs become your pages, and those pages become your chapter. And then you just repeat that process for the book, of course. Now it's a little bit more systematized than that, right? Because we really kind of have it down to a science by now to really make sure that people are completely set up for success. But
Mhm.
it's a system just like anything else. If you have a system that works, then you understand that the end result is always going to be in that. And that's really important for people to know, because sharing your story is very vulnerable. So the reason that we have put structure around it, but still allows you to be creative, like it's the structure does not take away the essence of anyone's story. That's so important for us, right?
Mhm.
But it's important for you to know you're safe. It's important for you to know you're going to succeed at the end of this. It's important for you to know that if you go through all of this effort to share your vulnerable and important story, you have to know you're going to be successful at the end of this. I think that's very important for people. So we've taken the time to really build these step-by-step systems around it so that people can ensure that they are in a safe environment, that they will succeed at the end. And let's go back and that their story matters. That's the most important thing to us.
I love that you're saying that because I think the biggest issue is that people make it too big of an issue. They think, oh, an entire book, and then it sort of paralyzes them because it seems so overwhelming and they don't know where to start. But if you indeed have a system and you trust the process and you just do every day the next step and the next step and the next step and the next step, before you know it, it will be something that you didn't even see coming.
Absolutely. It's a perfect way to put it. Absolutely. And a beautiful result at the end. Absolutely.
I love it. So I can imagine that everybody that has been listening that feels like they have a story in them, that they might want to know where to reach you or where to contact you. So with whom do you work and how can they find you?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So we haven't announced it publicly yet, so I'm not sure when this is going to go live, but that's okay. Whenever, it's fine. So you're the first to know. And so literally, we haven't put it, you won't see it anywhere yet. At the end of this week, we plan to go live with it, but you're the first to know. And so we have a new book coming out. And this is our first book in about a year, about a year. So we've really revamped our entire, there's a lot going on in publishing right now, and just even on social, right? Like as things change and evolve, right? And
Yeah.
so we revamped our entire system so that it's like a really easy plug-in. I told you how we're very serious about the level of success that our authors have, right? And so with that, we revamped everything and made sure that it was really up to par with being able to plug into what's going on social and in the world today. So our new book is a collaboration book. We accept 30 authors only, and it's called Believe Beyond. And so really what this book is called, who we hope we're calling to this book is people that have chosen to believe beyond their circumstances, believe beyond something that has happened in their life, believe beyond a certain dream or where they grew up or a certain paradigm or a relationship or something that has to do with their health or whatever that may look like. And we're really calling in stories for that belief piece, that thread, that like thing that you can't see and you can't touch, but they absolutely know that it was the belief that got them through it. And then how they applied that to the situation in their life and what that looks like now today. So it can be a moment in time, or it can be kind of how you've done this philosophy your entire life. But I really, truly believe I believe that it all starts with belief. I really, really, really think that's so important.
Mhm.
So that's our next book. And you can find my email is kate@katebutlerbooks.com. And that is where I actually accept all stories or author conversations. My website is also katebutlerbooks.com, and I am Kate Butler Books across all the socials. So you can find me on Facebook and on Instagram and LinkedIn, YouTube, Kate Butler Books everywhere. So I hope to keep that pretty simple.
I love it. That's what I've done also, because it makes finding you so much simpler. And I love that you have done the same. So I'll make sure for everybody that's listening that all the links that you mentioned are included in the show notes, probably below this video. But check around this video if you don't immediately see them, because they will be there. So if you want to explore this book with Kate, reach out to her. If you feel like I have my own book and maybe Kate wants to help me publish it, or wants to publish it, or whatever, also feel free, I think, right, to reach out to you, Kate.
Absolutely. Yes, absolutely. Yep. Journals. We help people publish journals and children's books and, everything under the publishing umbrella. Absolutely.
I love it. I've loved our talk today. I found it incredibly inspiring, and I love the mission that you have and the way that you're fulfilling it. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom here today.
Thank you so much for having me. This has been amazing. It's always an honor to spend time with you. So I really appreciate it.
Likewise. So there you have it, everybody. Everything you want to know about your story and why your story matters. So thank you so much for your love, your support, for supporting this channel by liking it, sharing it, commenting. If you have questions, remarks, please feel free to use the comment field. And for today, I wish you an amazing rest of your day, and I will talk to you next week with another wonderful guest. Bye for now.